Planning Commission meeting. I call this meeting to order, and if I could have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I do have a flag here. We can direct our vision. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on to roll call. Stephanie, if we could have vote roll call.
Of course. Commissioner Guerrero.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez.
Present.
Chair Sanchez.
Present.
Commissioner Quill.
Present.
Commissioner Flores.
Present.
Commissioner Armstead.
Here.
Commissioner Lewis.
Present.
Commissioner Chang.
Present.
Okay, and Commissioner Morales is excused. We have quorum.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Going on to the consent agenda. Oliver, do we have anything on the consent agenda?
No, we do not this evening. We just have our 2 items for tonight.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. Going on to public hearing items prior to starting the public hearing. I wanted to ask if anyone has any conflict with any of the items present today on our agenda. I see no hands. Wonderful. So how the meeting will be conducted is we'll first hear a report, and then we will open it to public comments or public hearing. Then we will hear from, well, at this time, I don't believe there is a person in charge of that project that we're being presented with today. From there, we'll go down the line of commissioners, so everyone has a moment to answer or ask questions, and then we'll deliberate and continue on to the next item. All right. For the public hearing items, the Planning Commission will first hear a report from staff, and then the public hearing will be opened. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak. Next, members of the public will be allowed to speak. After all have spoken, the applicant will be allowed to respond. The public hearing will then be closed, and the Planning Commission will begin deliberations and make a decision. All actions except general plan amendments and amendments to the Municipal Development Code are final actions unless an appeal is filed or a fee paid within 15 days to the Community Development Department. If you challenge the resultant actions of the Planning Commission in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this agenda, or in written correspondence delivered to the Community Development Department at or prior to the public hearing. All right. If we could have the report for first item.
Thank you. Item number 1 this evening is Development Code Amendment 2101. This is specifically for accessory dwelling units. Those that have been on the commission a while may remember we did talk about this about a year and a half ago. Toward kind of the end of 2019, we went through a few different sessions looking at adopting some standards for the city specifically. A little bit, just for a little background, after that meeting, we did end up pulling the item before it moved forward for formal adoption because we got caught up right in the middle of a new legislative cycle where a number of new bills came into play that completely changed what we were trying to adopt. So we kind of took it back over this last year, kind of got mixed in with everything else. We've been working on it, and we finally have kind of a new ordinance to bring forward to you tonight for consideration. So as I mentioned, there have been quite a bit of legislative action going on this in the last few years. When we look before, well, going back to 2016, that was when kind of the real focus on this kind of kicked into gear. The state adopted the first bill, Senate Bill 1069 and Assembly Bill 2299. That was really what put the standards we have today in place, regulating accessory dwelling units throughout the state. And then subsequently, pretty much every year, they've adopted at least one or more bills that have gone in and amended the standards. So, cities constantly, even if you have an adopted ordinance, have been kind of having to play catch up. The big thing from these is that any city, ourselves included, that did not have an ordinance that was up to date with any of this legislation, anything they did have in place was immediately rendered null and void when these took effect. So for the last couple years, we have been we've been implementing accessory dwelling units and permitting them, but we've simply been adopting what the state has put in place with no additional consideration for the city, just to maintain compliance. Now we're trying to correct that. Next slide, please. So the big thing with the accessory units, and this also goes back to before when we looked at it, is that these have to be looked at when they come in as a purely ministerial action. What that means is primarily someone comes in, they want to build one, just like they would, with a room addition or anything to their single family residence, and you really just implement them with a building permit only. There is no discretion. We can't say, well, we don't like it here, so we wouldn't move it. It's really, it meets prescribed standards, and we have to process it. The most recent change to that, though, is that we now have kind of two categories of ADUs that we look at. Those would be the exempt and the non-exempt. What that means, and bear with me, this gets a little in the weeds, so we'll try to make it as simple as possible, is there are 4 scenarios that are prescribed by the state where if a project comes in, meets very explicit statutory requirements that are usually limited to 2 or 3 specific details, then that project is immediately has to be processed as a building permit. The non-exempt are any project that doesn't fall in those specific categories. Now the city has a little bit of ability to implement some additional standards, specifically parking requirements as they may be applicable, architectural design requirements, setback or size requirements, things of that sort. So we have one section where we can do that, and one section where we really, for lack of a much better phrase, we really don't have any say in what an owner can do. Next slide, please. So these next couple slides are a lot of the changes that the state put in place that are simply applicable across the board for every city. The first one, in no particular order, we have, in no instance shall we implement a regulation, specifically lot coverage or setback requirements, where someone cannot construct up to 800 square feet. Usually on a single family residential property, we have, like a 35, 40% coverage. Sometimes, you can't build over that, so that may limit you. In this case, even if someone goes above that coverage requirement, they still have to be allowed to construct at least 800 square feet. Next is if you're converting any existing structure on the property, whether it's part of the residence or an accessory structure, there are no setback requirements. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't still have to comply with building code and fire code requirements for ingress and egress, but from a development standpoint, we cannot impose any kind of setback. If they are doing new construction, the most we can specifically require are 4-foot setbacks from the side and rear. That doesn't mean someone can't do more if they choose. It just means we can't require that it's any further away. Next, and this was a new one in kind of this last, in the last couple of years here, is if you do convert any of your existing parking, like your garage, the city cannot require that parking be replaced anywhere on the property. So someone can come in, they can do, a smaller unit within the garage area, create new entrance to it, close off the garage door, those types of things, but they do not have to replace that garage like we used to require. The next one is that junior accessory dwelling units are now just permitted by right under certain specific scenarios with specific requirements. In the past, those were something that the city could allow if they wanted to, but they weren't required. And the last one is that accessory dwelling units, there are now standards which allow you to develop them not just on single family properties, but on multifamily properties as well. That's a little bit different. There's 2 different scenarios, whether you're converting space or newly constructing space, and all that's spelled out in words. Next slide. The other changes are that owner occupancy is an absolute requirement if you are constructing a junior accessory dwelling There's no requirement if you construct a full unit, but if it's the smaller one, you do have to have the owner residing on property, one of the two spaces. The next one, and this one's been a little bit trickier implementation-wise, is that you can now do them anywhere on a property that is zoned for single-family residential, which you used to, multiple-family residential, whether it has a single-family unit or a multiple-family project, and anywhere where mixed-use development is permitted. And that's the biggest change. So what that means for our city is that the majority of the commercial zoning districts, if there's an existing residential development, they would now be allowed to construct an accessory unit. In the past, it was primarily limited to just residentially zoned areas, regardless of whether you had a house. Next one is that there can be no separate conveyance of the unit. What that means is that you cannot sell, there are multiple units on a single property, you cannot sell one separately. They can be rented out, as the next note states, for no less than 30 days, but you cannot sell one or do anything like that to transfer it separately from the primary home. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, that really lays out the standards that the state has established for us. There are now some areas, they're much more limited than they used to be in the past, but there are some areas where the city did have a little bit of flexibility on how we could implement certain requirements. As far as square footage, that being the first one, in no situation can units be larger than 1,200 square feet. But what we have done and what the state does afford us to do is to put lower requirements based off the unit size. The standard that we've worked in place, and this is consistent with a lot of our surrounding jurisdictions, would be for units that contain up to one bedroom, would be 850 square feet, which is kind of typical. And then if they are two bedroom units, they could go to 1,000. For detached structures, if this is new construction specifically, and this was something that we discussed quite extensively in the past, we would limit them to 16 feet in height. That would be a single story. And that would be to help kind of blend them with the surrounding properties a little bit better. And then on that same note, requiring architectural compatibility, both kind of in scale, design, pitch, color, materials, those types of things. And that would be to better integrate them with the property. What I do want to clarify with this, thank you, Stephanie, is these standards would only be applicable to those units that are classified as non-exempt. If there are those 4 different categories of exempt units that the state has established, they would not be subject to these requirements. They're subject to very strict statutory requirements that the state has established already. Now we can go into the next one. And then the last two are two that the staff had considered as we were preparing this. There's a couple things with parking. Parking is a little bit tricky with how you can do these now. What we are afforded is the option, if we choose, to require one space for any unit. That is one space regardless of whether it's a studio unit or a 2-bedroom unit, regardless of the square footage. But there are a number of exemptions to that. Kind of working through them, you do not have to require, as I said, if you convert any parking space, you don't have to replace them. So those types of units would be exempt. You do not have to require parking space if a unit is constructed out of any existing, out of the primary unit or any existing accessory structure. And then you don't have to, among a couple other exemptions, you don't have to if you're within a half mile of a transit station. Looking at that, and as we went through the different scenarios of the types of units and how you may be able to build them, it's really pretty limited to only the units that are detached, that are new construction, could require a parking space. And again, you can only require one space. And what we looked at is that if we were to do that, part of the state law says that any parking space that's provided on the property, it does not have to be enclosed. We cannot require that. It can be provided in any configuration on the property. So in the very limited scenarios where we could require a parking space, property owner could simply driveway to satisfy that requirement. Because that really creates such a simple way of avoiding having to actually construct new parking, And because it would only be applicable in a very narrow situation, we looked at it and decided that it would be more efficient for staff review time and simpler for the property owners to just not require it. The second option is for those non-exempted units that I mentioned, the ones that can be subject to, height requirements, setback requirements, architectural requirements, things of that sort. The city does have the option, if we chose, to require a permit for that. It still has to be a ministerial action, which means as long as a property owner meets the specific requirements that we potentially adopt this evening, they would be permitted. There would be no discretion about whether we wanted to approve it or not. What it would do is just afford us that permit to verify compliance with those standards before they moved into plan check. Again, we looked at it and it really seemed, based off of our consideration, that there wasn't a benefit really gained from that process. We're already going to be adopting these prescribed standards. We're already going to be implementing them exactly as written, and we're going to be reviewing that through the plan check process. So there's really it's nothing gained or lost if we didn't do that separate permit. And based off of the volume of these that we received and staffing considerations, it really didn't seem the best process for us to create another layer of review, another layer of bureaucracy to go through to review this. And it didn't accomplish anything by doing that we wouldn't accomplish it without permit. So we decided to look at these simply as by right, as we would, like I mentioned, the existing single-family residence, the addition, anything like that. Next one, please. And with that, I know that's a lot of information. I know that's can be a little bit overwhelming. There's certainly even more information than that in the draft ordinance. Our recommendation in the discussion is to adopt Resolution 2021. That would be forwarding a recommendation to the council to find this as a statutorily exempt action, and then moving the item forward for approval based off the findings of fact. All right, thank you. And I will open it up now to what I believe will be many questions.
Madam Chair, if I may add a little bit to that presentation, please. Thank you, Travis. As Travis mentioned, the state law kind of governs how we cover accessory dwelling units, and it really limits on those things that we can change or modify that's different than what the state law allows for. Did want to point out a couple things. Is that it's my perspective that that the new regulations are really targeted for existing properties, existing residential properties. If you may recall, some of the commissioners that have been on here for a bit, we've had some of these larger tract maps come back with the development permits, if you recall, and so we approved their architecturals, right? Their floor plans and their architecturals and things. And for those types of projects, we still have the ability. Travis mentioned, if you recall, in there's, we can't regulate setbacks and those kinds of things as it relates to the accessory dwelling unit. But what we're able to do with these new tract homes or new subdivisions, if you will, is that we could require them to meet the standards or the city's requirements for lot coverage, setbacks, parking, and those kinds of things. And if you cross some of these maps, some of those projects that we have approved, commission approved, where they included an accessory dwelling unit, that was kind of as an aside item, and that was kind of superimposed on the site plan, so you could kind of sort of see where it was. We weren't asking for an action on the approval to include the accessory dwelling units. That's why that wasn't part of the recommendations. But you still got the footprint of the house and everything else. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, at the end of the day, with new construction, we will still be able to regulate how the sites are developed. And so when you hear a statement like we can't regulate setbacks or lot coverage or those kinds of things, that really is as it relates to the accessory dwelling unit in correlation with the house or the existing property. So as you know, we have a lot of residential houses in town, and the state's goal, you may have heard of, the state allocates housing units per city. I believe that the city, they're called Regional Housing Needs Assessment or RENA numbers. San Bernardino's is a little over 8,000. So somewhere we have to magically be able to accommodate for over 8,000 units within our city over the course of the next 7 years. So there are a lot of cities that are what are referred to as built out communities, where every lot's already been built, already has something on there. So there's no physical way that they can add a new units without having to do demolitions and those kinds of things. And so for that, the state's reaction has been, and the legislators' reaction has been, well, let's kind of focus on accessory dwelling units, kind of a thing. And for some of us that have been in planning for a while, I remember when ADUs first came out, and there was all kinds of regulations. You had to get a covenant that you would never rent it out. It would have to be a family member, and so it's really gone in a whole new direction now. Where we are a little, I'll say, handcuffed in terms of how we can regulate these or whether or not we can. But I just wanted to point out that it does not affect how we can regulate the construction or design of the main residence. So I wanted to be clear on that. And as Travis mentioned, the one thing like a detached accessory dwelling unit, and we talked about this at our prior hearings, if you recall, where we set that 16-foot height limitation. What the new accessory dwelling ordinance allows for is if you have a detached garage in the backyard, guess what? You can convert that into a unit, and you don't have to build a new garage. And so what this allows, well, since you can convert the garage, okay, but we don't want you to we don't want the 2-story unit, because a lot of these detached garages, if you notice, when you start looking around, look up and down the neighborhoods for the detached garages, you will notice that they're usually on the property line, and they're usually either on the side property line or the rear property line. So the neighbor that you had behind you that had a single car garage right at the back property line, all of a sudden would, if we allowed for a 2-story accessory detached unit, now you have a neighbor that's right on your backyard property line looking straight down in, or that possibility. And so those are some of the reasons why we were recommending in the past, and still do, for that 16-foot height limitation, to kind of preserve some of the privacy rights for the residents. That's really all I really wanted to add to it, and we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just say very quickly, thank you for adding that. I know sometimes I get caught up in a lot of the regulations, so it is important, as Oliver had stated, to stress that nothing that we're looking at tonight would stop us or prevent us from enforcing requirements, all of the existing requirements we have on the homes themselves, on the primary units, either new or existing construction. These are simply for the accessory. And what we've done, even though the state has put several scenarios where we are, for lack of a better phrase, extremely limited in what we can regulate, we've still done where we can those things, like you mentioned, with the height, to ensure as much compatibility as we're legally allowed to, so that we don't have these scenarios where the neighborhoods just kind of go, upended because of, the heights or just kind of incompatible uses moving.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Travis. Thank you, Oliver, for clarifying those things.
You're welcome.
At this time, I will open public hearing for this item. And Stephanie, do we have any public comments for this item?
We do not.
Okay, perfect. So I will go from commissioner to commissioner. Commissioner Guerrero, do you have any comments?
No, I think we're all bound by what the state's requirements are. So if plan doing the best they can, I hope we're not going to overbuild.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Guerrero. Commissioner Lopez, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I only have one question, and it's really, I guess, for my information.
Does the state have any requirements or limits the number of residents in a unit in an ADU? How many people can live there, or families or anything like that?
There's nothing written into state law for the accessory units that talks about the capacity for them. Really, the only limit is the square footage that we can impose on the unit.
And I guess then it would just be up to the person who owns it, who is renting and so forth, as to how.
Effectively. And I would compare it. A lot of what we did when we were looking at these and how we wanted to enforce standards were kind of how would we look at it for the primary unit. And to your question, we don't have any requirements in our code. You know, we have limits if somebody builds a new single-family residence on placement and size and height, but we don't enforce any standard for what the occupancy could be of the structure. We would look at these exactly the same.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Quill, any comments?
Yes, I actually have a question. Have there already been people at the counter submitting plans or trying to build these as of now?
Yes, going back actually it's been about 4 years now since the first wave of legislation came into effect. I believe that was January 1 of 2017. We've had applications come in. To be honest, I probably see at least 1 or 2 emails or phone calls a day, where someone's trying to get information about them.
Okay, so it's probably imperative that we move rather quickly and try and get some kind of plan together. Have any of the planners looked at any surrounding cities like Redlands perhaps and how they are handling this?
As we were putting this together, I did look at a lot of the surrounding jurisdictions. It's a little difficult because with the way that the legislation is just kind of leapfrogged itself every year, you have cities that maybe adopted standards a couple years ago when the first big wave came through. New standards have come into play and they haven't updated their ordinances yet. So it's a little hit and miss as to what we can really follow. But we did look at kind of generally how the surrounding cities have worked. We did also work heavily with our legal counsel, who's aware of how a lot of the other cities have been implementing it. And that was what we used when we kind of crafted those specific standards that we could enforce.
Okay.
So if I may add to that, if I may add to that, Travis and commissioners. So yes, our city attorney's office, they actually have prepared a template that complies with all the standards of state law. And over this past time, we've been working with, or primarily Travis has been working with the city attorney's office to see where those areas are that we could, have a little bit of uniqueness or standards, tailored to specifically for San Bernardino, i.e. the, limiting the detached structures to be the 16 feet. And so we did receive a really good template that's compliant with state law, with some little highlighted areas for that wiggle room, if you will. And that's what we're presenting to you this evening.
A couple of the items that were read off, that Travis read off, one of them in general was if you are to add to an existing structure. Well, I have a problem with that wording. It would have to be probably a permitted structure. In San Bernardino, we have quite a lot of older homes that have been added to over the years, and there's a lot of non-compliant structures out there that it'd be quite simple for somebody to come in and take out a permit for a structure that is never permitted. So there's some issues there. I don't know how you would address this whole thing unless we know the flexibility of what areas we have flexibility in, and go through each one of them with the idea of perhaps having the architectural features match the existing home, whether or not we want the parking. So I guess it's a whole list of things that we need to go through and discuss. I can see where it can be a real problem if we don't keep a handle on it. So that's my opinion.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Quill. Commissioner Flores, any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thanks, city staff, for being proactive about this. definitely a big change in a lot of things. One question related to Commissioner Quill's question. I noticed the city of Rancho Cucamonga had some language in their ordinance about non-conforming or unpermitted ADUs, and how lays out sort of a process on how they come up to code. So I was wondering if city staff has thought about that yet, or this is just what seems like the initial phase of policy updates.
Just to clarify, by bringing up to code, do you mean building fire codes, things like that, or maybe some specific development standards that we may have?
I guess just generally being permitted. So I'm sure there are many unpermitted ADUs throughout the city. So I'm wondering if the city can lay out some sort of process for those units to become permitted, or
as it is. I'll try first.
I was just going to add to that.
Oh, go ahead.
I know that a number of cities, and not just on ADUs, but maybe in other structures too. You're right. There's a history, not just in San Bernardino, but across the state, for unpermitted structures, and specifically, are the planner's favorite, illegal garage conversions. And I think that most of you have seen one or two of those in our city, where a garage is no longer for parking cars. There's people living inside of there now. That is not allowed by our current standards. And so those are, as you refer to, those are unpermitted structures. What some cities have done to deal with unpermitted structures or what have you, or illegal garage conversions kind of thing, they've adopted standards for what they call under an amnesty period, kind of thing, or process. And so what they will do is they will advise the public and say, well, for a whatever period of time, 6-month period, a 3-month period, or a year, whatever the case is, with no penalties, come on in on your own accord, and we will help you permit your, get permits and legalize that converted garage into an ADU. A lot of it comes because at a certain point, as Travis mentioned, the ADU ordinances or laws have been around for a while, and there's an issue of having an extra unit and then making it safe. And so unfortunately, there's many stories of families that have been, or individuals that have been lost because of faulty or electrical system, systems that aren't to code and those kinds of things, and they create hazards. And so an amnesty program that some cities have done allows the inspector to go in there, make sure that they don't have that octopus on the plug, with one plug, and you've got all the wires coming from that kind of a thing. And so so a lot of cities have kind of adopted that kind of thing. We have not included that in our draft here. There's a list that we're creating of things that we want to address in our development code when we do that update, and how we want to handle non-conforming structures. Is something that's always been high on a list. How do we handle these? Along with that, Travis had mentioned about how the state law, if you have a house that's in a commercial zone, you could still add an ADU in there, and there's only because of the way that our ordinance our existing development code is established, the wording in that. And so we want to take a look at that. We've been advised by the city attorney's office we need to be careful with how much we include or tweak in our ordinance, because ultimately it has to be approved by the state. Once the city adopts it, we send it up to HCD, the state office. They review it and make sure that we didn't sneak something in on them. And so that's an area that we'll take note of that in terms of what do we want to do with these unpermitted conversions kind of a thing.
If I can just add a little bit to that very quickly. One of the things that is something that we've seen in the past, I will acknowledge, somebody comes in, even unrelated to ADUs. Somebody gets cited by code enforcement, they have an illegal structure or an illegal addition. They'll come into our office, they're directed to planning, see how can they correct that, how can they. At that point, we'll work with them, just as we will in the future. And if it can meet the certain standards, obviously we don't condone building out of order, but if we can look at the structure and say, yeah, it still meets the setbacks, it's still the right size, we could approve this if you came in today for it, then we will work with them and direct them to building and safety so they still get the correct permits for it. We would do the same thing here. If there are additions, if something wasn't permitted, and we can definitely say that, separate or before we legalize converting the structure, we would make sure it meets those standards. And the one thing, it's not called out in this ordinance at all, just because it is not necessary to, but there's no waiver on any of these units for any kind of building code or fire code requirements. They're still going to be residential structures. They're still kind of the fire life safety standards that we need to meet. There's still egress requirements we need to meet, even on those existing structures. So that's not going to be waived. We're not going to be creating those hazardous situations where we're putting someone's life at risk by allowing them to just convert a quick old shed, just throwing up a couple walls or throwing in a sink or something. They still have to meet certain thresholds for the livable.
Thank you. Yeah, those were great answers. I would definitely support some sort of amnesty and some sort of campaign, ongoing campaign at the same time. It's like, get your structure permitted, get it up to code. My other question was for the maximum unit size for a 2-bedroom. I noticed it's at 1,000 square feet. Is that a state requirement, or can it be bigger or smaller?
So the state does allow, the state basically puts a requirement there that they cannot be, there's two, actually. In no situation can an ADU be larger than 1,200 square feet. That's just established across the board. And then what they do allow within their, within the government code is that a city cannot put any restriction that would limit a 1-bedroom unit, a studio or 1-bedroom to less than 850 or a 2-bedroom to less than 1,000. To kind of the commissioner's question earlier, we did look at a lot of other cities when we were putting that together. It seemed that a lot of other jurisdictions were looking at that as a good size to implement. So we took that shall not require or shall not allow less than this to establish a standard for size for those types of units. But certainly if we thought it was appropriate, they could be increased, but never larger than 1,200.
Got it. Good. And then my last question, it's more for my own education purposes, but also just for the general public. So I know a lot of single-family homes in the city of San Bernardino. A lot of them are rental single-family homes. So I'm assuming the owner of that home could begin the process of building an ADU without the renter, the homeowner the current renter's consent. Is that correct?
I mean, that really sounds like more of a civil kind of matter question. There's nothing that I've seen in state law or in any of my discussions that really speaks to that.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a weird, I don't think people have been thinking about it, but I'm just like, what's going to happen when suddenly someone renting a home, suddenly the home becomes two?
I don't know. I mean, Albert may be able to chime in on that one, but that's really, usually when those types of questions come up, we kind of go hands off. That's really a civil issue between two parties. That's outside of the city's purview, especially in regards to development requirements.
Yeah, Commissioner Flores, my guess would be that the homeowner can do it. They own the land, and so even though the renter has some rights, the owner still has the right to do what they want, so long as it's not interfering with the renter's ability to stay in the home.
Got it. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. Commissioner Armstead, any questions?
Okay, forgive me because I'm kind of new, so I actually read the whole thing. Let's see. Is my understanding, is there a minimum size of 800 or there's no minimum size? Maximum size is 850, minimum, there's no minimum?
So we didn't actually write a minimum into ours because we weren't trying to restrict that. The way that state law is written is that no city can require or can impose a restriction that would allow less than an efficiency unit. That's something that's defined by the building code. I don't know. I believe it's, I want to say about 220 square feet is the minimum, somewhere in that range. But the exact number escapes me. But as we drafted it, we didn't feel that that was necessary to really cite. Usually if someone wants to build larger, that's the question. No one's trying to go in and willingly build less.
So then my next question is, can you have more than one ADU on your property?
So the way that it works, ADU, no, but you can have a junior accessory unit and an accessory unit. Because the accessory units typically are constructed either as an addition to the home or in a detached structure. The junior units are something that you would carve out of the existing home. You see that a lot, kind of to Oliver's point earlier about the new subdivisions coming in. You'll see that where the homes now have, maybe kind of like a separate quarters that has its own entrance, has a small kitchen, for a parent or someone else. That would be your junior unit. You could have potentially your primary home, that unit within the space of the home, and then a detached unit. But that would be the absolute maximum on a single family property.
And the reason I'm asking is, if they can have more than ADU and you don't have a minimum size, I can see it being abused in some instances. Okay, I can have 2 or 3 units at 300 square feet. Can something like that happen?
No, again, because you are limited to, to make the distinction, you'd have the single family residence, that's the existing home, the accessory unit, that's going to be the one, 800 or so, and then a junior unit, which are capped at 500 square feet. Those 3 are the most you could ever have on a single family property, regardless of how small you build them. It's not a situation where, if you just build them, you can build so much square footage. If you build them small, you can cram more in. You're still capped at that number, no matter what size.
Okay, but that's good. I was just wondering, could that be abused? And let's see. It was just, let's see. I was reading this under 5G. It had an error in subsection to what? I was reading it and I couldn't.
Oh, let me bring that up. You said 5G.
5G.
All right, that sounds like it was just a typo.
Yeah. I just wondered because like I said, I'm new, so I'm reading all of this.
That's a good catch, Commissioner Armstead. I noticed some things myself, Travis. I didn't have time to shoot.
Oh yeah, usually you catch these for me.
Yeah, and I did. I just didn't have time to type it up for you.
No, my apologies. Let me bring that up, and I can tell you exactly what that is.
Yeah. So after the meeting's done, I'll shoot an email, Travis, with the ones that I found. So if we could just fix them before we send it to council, assuming it passes tonight.
Sorry, bear with me just one moment, and I will get an answer to that question.
And then I was looking for subsection O. It kept referencing subsection O. If you
That's the error. That's yeah.
That's the error. Okay, because I was looking for it.
Yeah.
And it references O quite often.
That may have just been an error in accepting track changes. So I'll definitely get that fixed. Just one moment.
In the planning world, we call that we owe you on ice cream.
Okay. Let's see. And then one more question. I saw that we're going to get everything processed in 60 days. Is that realistic?
That is a requirement from the state. So
Is it-
realism or not, they seem to deem it so. What that is really, as I understand it, and again, I may have to confer with council on that. I don't believe that speaks to the building permit itself. That speaks to our review of the item, because obviously, if an item required additional building corrections, as they were going through for compliance, that's something that's outside of our ability. But that goes more to the timeline for the actual development review of the item.
And that's realistic, 60 days?
Yeah, to be honest, yes, it is. With the way that these standards are crafted, frankly, so narrowly, it's really something that, we've started to kind of develop practice over the couple years that we've been implementing the existing requirements, and usually it's pretty easy to look at it, tell if it meets our standards, meets the location, the size, things of that sort, and then the structural review. That's a separate matter.
Okay. That's all I had. That was it.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Armstead. Commissioner Lewis, do you have any questions?
Sorry, if I may, real quick, I just wanted to answer the commissioner's question about that subsection it was referencing. The one where that error came up, yeah, that looks like it was just a problem when we were putting it in Word. What that line is specifically saying is anything, when it says in this subsection, that error line shouldn't even be there. It's kind of self-referencing. It's referring to the owner occupancy requirement within Section 5G. And it's simply saying that would not apply if the property is owned by a government agency. So you cannot require the government agency to live at the property. That's all that was intended to be.
And then where's O? I can't look.
Sorry, can you possibly call out a specific section where you're seeing that? Oh, never mind.
Oh,
I see
there's
one.
several references to O.
Sorry, I see one. It just took me a moment. Let me bring that up here and I can tell you.
Yeah, there is no O, Commissioner Armstead and Travis. There is,
Oh, okay, references several times though.
it's other, right. I think it was a default, something in Word that when a red line was accepted, I think it inserted that O, but they should be internal references to other code sections. So they're going to vary from each one. Each time you see O, it's going to be a different internal citation.
Are you guys going to correct that? Because I'd like to go back and.
No,
Yes.
I will make sure that that's corrected. I'll consult with Albert tomorrow.
Several that say O.
Correct that. Yeah, it's not. Sometimes we'll call that just a technical glitch, as mentioned when we were doing some of the changes on the item. But that will be corrected before we move forward.
Okay. And we'll get a corrected one.
I mean, I could certainly, yeah, we can forward that once it's been revised.
I actually read this, so I.
Yeah, no, I obviously it's meant to be a public document. I welcome the review of it. I'm glad to hear everyone's taking a look at this, so certainly we can get that to you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lewis, do you have any comments?
Why, yes, I do. I want to kind of expand upon there in Exhibit D. I believe Dolores had mentioned about the 60 days that the city must act on the application that submitted within the 60 days. But reading on, I find that it indicates that if the city fails to do that within the 60 days, the application is deemed approved. How does that benefit? How does that benefit us if we're, because if we, the probability as we start getting these regulations and what have you in place, there's a probability that we might see more applications for ADUs. And if they just start falling through the crack because we don't have the resources or wherewithal to address each one, they just get approved. How does that work? Or is that just the way that goes, or what? That doesn't make any sense to me.
So if I may, Commissioner, add to that, that's kind of a biggie. Was that?
I was gonna say, go ahead. I wanted to add something.
It's kind of the just kind of a little bit of background. Our current state law, it has what we call the Streamline Processing Act. And so if someone submits an application for a conditional use permit or development permit or something like that, the law says that we have 60 days or 30 days, to deem it complete. So you submit your application, and we'll go through. If you're missing something, then the clock stops. Right? And so you submit your application, or you didn't have your, it's not properly dimensioned, or whatever the case is. We write up the corrections, we give it back to you, right? And then you resubmit it, and then the clock starts again. So so what that does, it a couple of things. One, it kind of puts the responsibility of the applicant to get as a complete application as possible, right? Get everything on the plans instead of just submitting something just for the sake of submitting it, so that the submittal is complete as possible. And then it also, in fairness, it also kind of requires or provides for city staff to review it, so it doesn't just sit there. Kind of thing. And so that standard, by the way, is only for our review. Go ahead.
No, I guess what I'm concerned about is the, worst case scenario, we missed one that we didn't act on. And I clearly hear you, Oliver. I mean, if someone submits an application and there is, correspondence or a decision or whatever in regards to that application, that's an act. It's, we've basically fulfilled, whether it's approval or, hey, we need you to change this or whatever. Once we act on it in any manner, with what I'm reading, it kind of stops the 60-day clock. However, given that, we may very well, and I think we would like to see an increase in these types of applications to satisfy the need for additional housing and what have you. One that slips through the crack because it didn't get acted upon in any way within the 60 days to be deemed approved. I guess my question on this is, to what degree is that approval, to what degree is that approval?
If I may,
that's
Oliver.
That's the planning approval.
Yeah.
That's not an issuance of a building permit.
Okay.
Yeah, I did want to just say, just to clarify, and I think Oliver actually just kind of hit it, that is the consideration of our review, the planning review, what we would look at for compliance with this section we have in front of us. That's separate from any building permit or fire permit or anything else like that. Those are distinct matters. And I hate to use this answer as well. Not my favorite with this subject, but this section and that processing timeline is something directly out of the state law. So that was something I did discuss with our legal department, and we implemented that exactly as written. So again, kind of to the question of whether it's realistic or not, the state in their wisdom deemed it so. So, we are obligated to abide by that.
Yeah. And I'm not, the 60 days, it is what it is. It's a state requirement. I get that. I just wanted to kind of throw some light on what, how, when we say that if we don't make that 60 days, which, I don't know how we could not answer it within the 60 days act upon it to some degree, but yeah, when they say that the application is deemed approved, does that now allow that that application to move forward to the next step without any,
Yeah, I think what we're talking about really is, we're looking at this section when we have one come in, hypothetically. We're going to be looking at the size of it, making sure it falls within whatever square footage limitation is appropriate based off, converted, attached, detached, whatever it may be, the height limit, setbacks if they're applicable, those types of things. What this is really saying is if an application came in, we would look at that. We have to look at it within that time frame, and then they can proceed, providing compliance, they proceed through the building department. If for some reason we didn't review it within that time and maybe they were slightly over the square footage or there was some minor issue that didn't comply with this section, at that point we passed that 60-day cutoff. That application is still going to be approved, even though we would have otherwise corrected.
I see.
So yes, there is the potential for something minor to slip through, but realistically, like I said, the standards here are so specific and so focused, depending on which type you're trying to do, that the review time really, barring some really disaster, there's no reason it should ever be getting close to that time period.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Travis. Thank you. Also, I wanted to know, are we so? And I'm speaking now specifically about existing structures on a lot where there is a primary residence there, and they want to convert this, say, detached garage into an ADU. There aren't very many that I've seen around the city, but there are some still there that have the overhead electrical wires running from the house to that structure. Is there something in the code that says that they got to remove that and go subterranean with the electrical? Because, some of that is not going to be sufficient to safely operate an ADU.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this section, that's really outside of the requirements that we would be looking at, especially because we're so even more limited than we are in general. We're so very limited with what we could enforce if you're converting an existing structure. What I would say, and I don't want to venture too far out of my wheelhouse, is something like that. If there was maybe a hazardous wiring situation, even if it was an existing structure, that would be looked at with the building review of the project through the inspections that would be done as part of the conversion. And I would say if there's any kind of hazard from it, if it's an aesthetic issue, really I think we're pretty much kind of set where we are. But if there was some hazardous situation stemming from it, that would be addressed through the building.
Right, and Travis, as we move forward with, because this is all about standardizing our ADUs. So is there some language somewhere? I guess we have to probably go into building and safety on that has indicated that I've seen a lot of ADUs that have been built at the new construction as a new construction, and they're always subterranean electrical. They just won't do the overhead. So I'm just wondering if that is going to be something that is going to be looked at as we move closer to getting all this lined up. Does that?
Yeah, I think really that type of thing, as I said before, I think it really falls more under the building and safety part of this process. And I would not be able to speak to that.
Okay. So but there should be codes. I mean, there's building and safety codes that we can look in reference.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, what we're looking at in this section is specifically related to the physical standards for the units. Anything that would be applicable, to a primary structure, to a conversion, to a new, ADU, whatever it may be, if it's something that's currently part of the building and fire code, nothing that we're considering this evening would ever grant any waiver to that.
I see. Okay.
This is really a related but separate matter. Those would still be implemented exactly as they are today on every other construction.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Before we go on to the comments by Commissioner Chang, at this time, I'm going to pass on the mantle of that to Commissioner Lopez. She will be conducting the rest of the meeting as I have a class right now. And so I thank you guys for attending this meeting, and I will see you at the April meeting.
Okay.
Have a
And
good
good
evening.
luck on your test.
Hi, Chair Sanchez.
Okay, well, I think Commissioner Chang hasn't asked a question or made a comment. Do you have anything,
Okay.
Commissioner Chang, regarding this item?
Yes, I do have questions. Thank you. I have 6 questions. I'll just go through real quick here.
Right.
Yeah.
Do lightning round.
Yeah. This is line item 3.E.3 regarding the sanitation facility. Travis, I just wanted to understand that this line item is regarding that ADUs to provide independent or bathrooms, right? The full bathrooms.
I'm sorry. Can you tell me? Sorry, which section was that?
3.
Under the junior. Yes.
3.E.3. Yeah.
Yeah. So as part of the definition for junior units, or one of the distinctions that we make in how we define what's an accessory dwelling unit versus a junior accessory dwelling unit, in the junior, they are not required to have their own restroom facilities. They do still have to provide the efficiency kitchen, as you see on the next line.
Right.
But as it notes, and this is one of the definitions the state actually laid out for us,
Okay.
you could potentially, because they're smaller units, could allow them still to share the restroom with the primary home through an internal connection.
Okay, that's it. Yep. All right, and that's one. And then the next item is I'm going to jump to the section 6.
Okay.
Section 6A3. Section 6A3 states that 6A3 FAR. Let's talk about FAR. Application for the for this ADU. Can you just because I understand that every lot has a FAR requirement. If you have a lot that has say the owner wants to build a 1,000 square feet ADU, for example, and that's going to be a brand new ADU on the lot. Does that mean the owner still has to adhere to the FAR under this line item?
Yeah, so the way that it works, I know FAR and lot coverage often kind of get used interchangeably. In the city here, we focus more on lot coverage instead of the FAR.
Okay.
Specifically for residential. For non-residential, we utilize FAR a little bit more. But what this standard basically means is, normally, if someone comes in and just wants to construct an addition to their home, forget about a separate unit. They just want to do a bedroom addition or something like that, or garage or anything. We would look at the total square footage, the total footprint, square footage of all the structures on the property. Divide that by the property. That's your lot coverage percentage. In your typical single-family zoning district, that's 35%. And when we do that math, if someone wanted to construct like I said, a bedroom, a patio, a garage, a shed, whatever it may be, and they were over that 35%, they wouldn't be able to do so. They would have to adjust the square footage down so that they fit that maximum. What this section establishes, and this is something that the state requires, is that if someone wanted to come in and construct a new detached unit or an attached unit to the home, and we looked at that square footage, let's say they were already at 33%
Right.
the home, and they wanted to add, some amount. If that pushed them over the 35%, we can't restrict that, as long as they're not constructing larger than 800.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
if they wanted to construct anything over 800 square feet, if they did that 850 or 1,000 or anything else,
Yeah.
then we could enforce the coverage maximum. But we cannot prevent them, for the purposes of lot coverage, from constructing at least 800 square feet.
Okay.
That is a minimum
Got it.
that the state put in place. That doesn't mean they have to construct that much, but we can't prohibit that.
Okay, I understand now. Okay, and then G3, 3G, 3, yeah, 6.G, 6.G.3.
Yeah, for
Exterior
exterior
lighting.
lighting.
Yeah. Can you explain to me what white lighting is part of this requirement? Them to downlight.
That was one that was kind of in consult with council in looking at kind of what type of architectural requirements we could put on the units.
I see.
It's really just for kind of reiteration that if you do put any lighting on it, for the benefit of the adjacent properties, especially, and kind of to Oliver's point earlier, because a lot of these units will be at the rear of the property, maybe very
Right.
close to property lines. You just wanted to
Gotcha.
ensure that any lighting is not, you don't want somebody building one and then shining a light right into your house next door,
Right. Agreed.
just because they may have that.
Okay.
Especially because they'll be lit for entrances to those units and things of that sort.
Cool. Okay. And then 6G7, the windows and doors at ADU in less than 30 feet away from property line, and the clear story with the bottom of the glass at least 6 feet above finished floor. So can you explain the common sense behind this one to me?
All right, give me just one moment.
Okay.
You know what? In all honesty, that one should not have been in there.
Okay.
And I would actually propose deleting that. That was one. There were a number of standards that we looked at kind of when we were consulting back and forth. And that was one that was actually intended to be eliminated, and it was an oversight on my part. That's not something that we enforced for the primary structure. So we didn't, and we wanted to be very clear with these. We didn't want to be overdoing it with the accessory units in any way where we wouldn't regulate primary unit.
Okay. Last question I have is general question. The reference is section 5C again. It's what other commissioners talked about. It's regarding the separate requirement for building safety for permit. As I understand it from the discussion that took place, basically this is planning requirement. And then there will be a separate requirement, separate sets of requirements from building safety department for building permit. And the building safety will review the building or ADU and JADUs in compliance to current code that includes structural, mechanical, such as Cal Green Energy, and electrical, life safety, fire protection, and fire alarm. That's how I understood the conversation.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, this simply, when we talk about our review of these items, it's simply for the standards that are within these standards. This is what's going to be in the development code, subject to the adoption. This doesn't speak to any code requirements for building and safety. One exception, though, that I will make, and it is noted in here. You'll see it under 5C.
Yep.
On the sprinklers. If you do have, that is one thing, and that is something that the state has required, is that normally we do, all new residential construction, we require sprinklers in the home.
Right.
If you had an existing home and it did not have sprinklers, you were not proposing a project to that home that would then require them, then the ADU cannot be required to have them.
Oh, wow.
It seems a little contradictory. I
Yes.
know where you're going, especially because the state requires them in new construction. But that is something that was written into state law. We can only do that if the main home has them or is required to have them.
Huh. Okay. That's a life safety
I know
issue.
that one's a bit of a head scratcher.
It's contradictory, yeah, because
Um,
the current code compliance is that fire sprinklers, fire alarm system, the fire protection, in supporting the life safety of the occupants in the building. That's what's called building safety, and not having the sprinkler, not having the new construction, new structures with sprinkler, it's really contrary to the current building code.
No, I don't think any of us that have reviewed this would disagree with you on that. It's certainly contradictory to all of the notions that we take with residential construction now. But that is a line exactly as written in the government code,
Yeah.
and there really is nothing. There's no authority that we're given to amend that.
And my understanding about ADU also is that whether it's existing structure, like say I have existing garage, or I want to build a new ADU on my property, the structural design, structural primary support system of the building has to be designed to current code. In other words, if I have existing garage, I want to turn it into an ADU, I have to hire a structural engineer to design to provide a new reinforced foundation system to bring up to current code in order for me to, get a review and approval for permit, right? So we got that for the building, structural, for plumbing, for mechanical, which is energy calculation, but yet no fire protection, no fire sprinklers. That's an oddball.
Again,
Okay.
I would refer you to your state representative on that one.
Yes, we will. We will appeal.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
not.
the
I know it's not a laughing matter. I know it is a serious question. It's a serious concern, and like I said, we've looked at that. We've discussed with various building staff over the couple years while they've been kind of putting this in place, and pretty much everyone I've seen questions it. And then you can refer back to the Gov Code, and it's right there in. It's one of the few things in this whole process that are actually in very clear, plain English.
So out of my curiosity, quick question. Do all those ADUs have separate meters? Is that what happens? That's my understanding that certain ADUs have separate meters, but I don't know if all ADUs have separate meters.
They're not required to.
Okay.
That would be something where you could, but if you were doing something on a multifamily property, if you were doing something where it was going to be a separate rental unit, then you may. That would make logical sense. If it was something, especially like a junior unit inside the home, and that may be for a relative, in that instance you may not choose to. But that's not something that's outright prohibited nor required.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang. Are there any other questions or comments from any of the commissioners or the staff before discussion on this item is closed? Okay, with that, thank you. And now we move forward, I guess, to a motion. Do I have a motion?
Oh, I motion that we move forward.
We need to have a motion based on the recommendation of the staff to adopt resolution number 2021-008. Do we have that in a second? Yes.
So one commissioner can say so moved, and then another one can say second.
Okay, so moved.
Okay, I have a motion in a second. Stephanie, will you take the vote?
Okay, can I just ask, just for clarity, the one standard in the architectural that Commissioner Chang had brought up that we said some intended to be omitted, I just want to make sure that it's noted that would be changed as well. or that would be deleted from the standards.
Okay. With that, Mr. Lewis, is your motion still stand?
Yes.
Okay, and the second as well.
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Okay, Stephanie?
Commissioner Guerrero,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Krill,
Aye.
Commissioner Flores,
Aye.
Commissioner Armstead,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
The item will be forwarded.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, everyone.
So we'll move on to item number 2, the general plan website. And I guess, Oliver, are you reporting on this item?
Yes, yes, Commissioners. Good evening. That was a good conversation, a good discussion on that last item. Thank you. Very fruitful. The next item before you is one of our other long-awaited exercises or items. You know, as we're in the beginnings of our update to our general plan, development code, and downtown specific plan. You know, we've been focusing on getting our what we'll call our public participation, community involvement, education process initiated. We've been working with PlaceWorks, our consulting team. They've been listening to the dialogue from the council meetings and such, in terms of what the needs of the community would be. So we prepared the website, and Stephanie will be putting up on the shared screen here momentarily. And so the goal of the website is, or the process, I should say, is really to help educate all of us involved. It's everyone from the public to the decision makers and everyone in between. So we all have the same baseline of knowledge and information. So Stephanie will show us how to get to that website. So if you log on to the city's webpage, you'll click onto government, over to community development, and then you'll end up over with the planning department. And we'll see the general plan update. Over time, you know, we'll be modifying this, and my guess is that we'll probably relocate it in a more prominent area, so it's maybe easier to find. But when you open up the page, this is what comes up. And so what we've tried to do is we try to make it user friendly, if you will. We have a large large population here, quite big cross section and demographics and those kinds of things. And so we wanted to make it easily so anyone could get on the website and navigate through it. So if you look at there's a top bar, the toolbar, as you will, you'll see the phrase is home, project review, participate, resources, facts and questions, and then contact us. Likewise, if you scroll down a little bit, you will see you will see the symbols, and it's essentially the same thing. So you'll be able to click on either of those items from either the top or the bottom, whatever is more convenient or easier for you to identify as you're trying to go through. So this serves as the introduction. One of the things that I do want to point out, Stephanie, if you don't mind kind of scrolling down a little bit more, please. If you see on the right-hand corner, lower right-hand corner, it allows you to sign up. So you can get on here, you type your name, your email address, and now you're officially enrolled in the class. And you'll get notifications whenever the website, when there's updates or new materials, surveys, or whatever whenever there's a change to the, update to the website, an email will go out, let you know that, hey, this is be advised that there's a new survey, there's a new questionnaire, there's a new document that that we're sharing with the company, and so that's the goal. We are also, and so you'll see there's an email address down there in the middle of the screen there, on the lower right, on the lower portion of the screen. That's the email address that you can email. That comes directly to me, by the way. So when I log on to my Outlook at my office, when my regular email comes up, I also have this email that comes to me, and so I will be able to monitor questions that come through. We're also looking to create there'll be a phone line, a designated phone line. And so what it'll do is when you call in, it'll allow you to record a message or a question, what have you, and it'll come into my my email inbox. So it'll be, you can leave messages similar to individuals that want to leave comments for the city council meetings when they call in and have a question or comment or whatever. It'll be that kind of arrangement. So if you have a question or what have you, or need further direction, you could either email us or you'll be able to leave a voicemail for us as well. Stephanie, maybe if you can go to project review, please. And so as we click here, it'll show you kind of it'll provide you with the summary of the process. Again, this is the initiation, so you'll be able to see here we're looking at the project schedule, so you can get at a quick glance what the timelines are for the different components of the overall project. So you'll see the general plan, the various milestones over the course of the next 2.5 or so years. Our housing element, which is something that needs to be completed by this October, submitted to the state by this October. We're initiating the downtown specific plan. That's on about an 18-month window. That's a little bit of a fast track because it also includes what we want to do with the Carousel Mall and the surrounding area of the downtown. And then we were also looking at updating our entire development code. And then we have the CEQA process. So this kind of provides you with just at a glance everything that's involved and the project schedule. And let's see, is there something when we scroll down? Can we scroll down, Stephanie? And so as we come down here, so these are, as I mentioned earlier, this is also for information sharing. So if you click on the general plan, it tells you what a general plan is, what it should include, and those kinds of things. And so I guess, so again, it's an education process so you know what we're looking to achieve, and it covers all of the elements of our general plan. And then we have our downtown specific plan. It'll do the same thing. I'll kind of give you a quick little synopsis, and it shows you a rough boundary of what we're looking at in terms of what we're calling the downtown core to the city. Then we have the development code. Again, this will be updated as we get towards that exercise, and so anytime there's updates when we start creating land use maps and those kinds of things, standards, policies, or what have you, they will be put in these particular locations. And like I said, this will be populated regularly, and again, we'll inform the public when changes are made. And then we go to environmental review, and that's we'll be preparing an environmental impact report for the entire project. And again, this will be updated, and notices will be sent, will be included here, so everyone is aware of when those documents are included. I will point out here, if you notice on the lower right-hand side or left-hand side here, these little boxes here where we have upcoming events and activities. And then we also have these two little take an initial, community survey. And so if we click on to the top one here, so there's a little, kind of telling you different ways to participate, little outline on that. And I believe there's a survey here, Stephanie. If we scroll down a little bit, we click here. And so once you sign up and what have you, you'll be able to go through, and there's a little series of questions that you can go through and answer. And then once you submit, it'll go into our system, and we will keep a tally and a summary of the responses. And then once, at certain milestones, this will be it for a while. At certain milestones, we will kind of report, you'll see some results of the survey kind of thing. So you can kind of see how it's coming along, what others are saying. Your identity is protected, by the way. So, what your answers, we don't identify who answered in what manner. We would just say, 20% of the people answered this, or 10% answered this was important to them, whatever the case is. And so we will provide those responses as they or percentage of what the response is as those become further down the line. Let's see, what else did we have here, Stephanie, on the bottom of that thing? So we're participating here. Let's see, I think we'll scroll down just a little bit more, please, on the participate. I think there's going to be some workshops. So whenever there's a workshop, it'll be, you can click on there here, where's the nearest workshop? As you know, we'll be identifying a general plan advisory committee. So if you're on a Saturday morning, you say, well, I wonder what the GPAC is doing these days. You can click on there, and then you can find out that you just had a meeting. In that case, you'll be able to look at the meeting notes, or that they're meeting next week, or whatever the case is. We have our downtown advisory committee. We'll be doing the same thing. As they're ready to meet, we will announce those items. I will mention that those two committees, those will be televised, if you will, just like this meeting here and the council meeting. So you will be able to watch on and see as those meetings are occurring live. And then lastly, when the items are presented to this body and to the city council, we'll also make those announcements there. We go into the resources, please. And this is an area where we're going to put our background documents. Like as an example, right now we have, I believe, a copy of our, or can guide you to where our general plan is. So if we click on the one that says background documents, please. So right here, you could go on there. So the city currently has a general plan. You can go here. There's the link on the lower on the right hand side. You click there, and all that will do is that'll route you back to the planning page and directly to the link of the general plan. Likewise with our existing housing element. And then you may be aware that over the course of the past 10 years or so, there have been other exercises in terms of downtown visioning for the downtown, or goals and those kinds of things. And so if you just kind of want to look at some of the historical participation in the past, you can do so. This isn't to say that these are the documents that we're looking to adopt or whatever, but a lot of this does involve public opinion. There was a lot of public input in these three exercises. And so we'd like to kind of build upon that. So we can use that for kind of as background knowledge, if you will. And then under the work products, again, as we're completing documents and those kinds of things, they will be made available there. And then additional resources as things come up, we will put them in there. In terms of some of these, these are a library, PlaceWorks, our consulting team for this. They do general plans up and down the state, and so these are basic learning tools, if you will. So if you want to read about what really is the composition of general plan design guidelines, what makes for planning for healthy communities, there's some reading material for extra credit you can go through and familiarize yourself with those items. And then I think we can go to here we have for facts and questions here. And so these are just some generic questions with what you may ask, and so frequently asked questions. And so we have a general plan as an example, so we can click there, and the basic, what is a general plan? What does it do? Why do we have it? Who uses it? How is it implemented? And so again, this is intended for a learning tool. We did the same thing for the development code, so it'll explain what a code is. And as commissioners, you have a little bit of a head start, knowing that it has development standards and guidelines and those kinds of things. And so, and then the last one really is contacting us. And so here we go. And as I mentioned, there's the email that comes to us, and then we are working with the IT department to assign us that designated phone line so that I could retrieve those voicemail messages. And so again, this is going to be a fluid document. It's going to be a living document. I will, as we meet on our regular monthly planning commission meetings, I will advise you if something's changed on there, something's been added. We also have our community newsletter, our monthly newsletter, as you know, that comes out through the city manager's office. We will be putting, reminders and announcements. Hey, don't forget to click on our website. Something new's on there. We've got a new survey. We're working on the one for April that's coming up, the next one, and so we'll be preparing a little article to summarize this and encourage people to log on, sign up, and become part of the process. That kind of completes my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions if any of the commissioners have any. The input, if you will, the area where you can, interject, some dialogue, or you have some thoughts or questions and those kinds of things. We will provide you with those prompts, kind of the questions and things. I have to say it, this isn't intended to be a Facebook kind of an exercise where everybody just can go on there and just write whatever they want and, let's fix the potholes, and we want to hear that, however many times. It's really going to be, a focused discussion, so that we can get everyone on the same page, everyone on the same thought process, and so we can come to a consensus. So as we go through this process on a month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter type of thing, we will all be. The goal is that we're all moving in the same direction. We all have the same level of understanding of what we're asking of the community members, and ultimately of the of you as a planning commission and the city council as the decision-making body. When these documents start coming to you, so you can review them and make recommendations to the city council. It helps that you have these you have these tutorials, if you will, of knowledge, and then, like I said, you'll be able to see the kind of the results of some of the surveys and questionnaires and those kinds of things. Typically, we have these meetings in our public hearings, right? And most of the time we have very few, if anyone, that calls in or has any input on our projects that we have before them. In this particular way, we will be able to share with you, this was the questionnaire. These are the results that we came. This was important out of these 4 or 5 items or factors. This percentage, rated this higher than this over here, kind of a thing. And so our goal is to give you the kind of the pulse of the community, so that helps you, where you're coming from, how your ideas or thoughts fit in with that, and then ultimately how our recommendations go to the city council. And so with that, I could talk all night about this, but I want to be mindful. If you have any questions, please feel free to. I'd be glad to answer them. You can also, if you have any questions that come up, during the day or the course of the week, please feel free to reach out to me. You know how to reach me, email and phone. So please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Oliver, for that presentation. We're going to open it up to any questions from commissioners, starting with Commissioner Guerrero. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. I actually went on the other day, and it's very easy to navigate. So that's going to be very helpful. How will we be able to notify the residents that aren't necessarily on Facebook, on any of the social media or anything like that? Will there be a mailer sent out or postcard of some sort?
I'm not sure how we're going to handle that yet. I mean, maybe some, in the paper and such, and that's a challenge. How do we get that word out? Kind of a thing. And so we're looking at ways. there's an assumption that everyone has a computer and everyone, logs on all the time, but I know that's not the case. And so we're working with that, and I don't know what else, through part of this community outreach and stuff is being coordinated through the city manager's office. Tanya in the city manager's office, she deals with or works with the neighborhood councils, and those kinds of things. And so we're relying a little bit on her to help us, spread the word kind of a thing. But that is something that will, that we're mindful of.
Okay, Commissioner Coyle, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Oliver, that was a very nice presentation, and I think that's going to be very helpful within our city. I have a idea of how we can get out to quite a few people, is if we can get some sort of introduction or maybe a presentation at the Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber hasn't been real active since this COVID thing, but we do have contacts with a fair amount of members. So,
okay.
So that would be a really good, if you had a 1 or 2 page, I'm not very computer literate, but there's something we could send out to the members to introduce them to this website or this page. It would be awesome.
So I think that's a great suggestion with the chamber and whatever other business association we may have in town. As I mentioned, we have the the newsletter that we send out monthly, and we do have. I've been working with PlaceWorks on some summaries, some introductions, and those kinds of things, and maybe we can work on where we send maybe a one page or email a one pager to you to the chamber office, and they can send out that blast to all the members, as it comes out, kind of a thing. And so, in this initial process, we want to try to direct as many people as we can. So once they've registered, then they're kind of in the system now. It's kind of like when you give, Macy's your email address. Now you get all their coupons for the rest of your life, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of what we're looking at initially. How do we get it out that exists? But then there's going to be a large gap of those that we haven't reached because of the computers, and other media. So we'll work on that. Yeah. And also with some of the groups, we do have some budget for public participation, or engagement, kind of, I'll say. And so, our PlaceWorks, they are going to make themselves available. So we can make presentations to some of these business groups, neighborhood groups, and those kinds of things. We are limited, on how many of those we can have, kind of a thing. And so we're working on a way to best formulate, how do we reach the most people in a variety of effective ways.
Okay, well, I am on the board of directors for the San Bernardino Chamber, so if I can be of any help, I'll be happy to.
Great, I greatly appreciate that, and we have your email address.
Yes, thank you, Oliver.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Flores.
Thank you, Oliver. That was a great presentation, and the website looks pretty good and really easy to navigate, which is important for these things. One question I did notice under, I think, the engagement timeline, there was something called the People's Planning School. And I was wondering if you can elaborate on that. What does that entail?
A series of, I don't want to say workshops, but, kind of your, reading materials, if you will. There's a lot of information out there in terms of, what is a general plan and those kinds of things. And so we want to have focus exercises. As an example, one of the main ones is our land use element. And there's we're doing everything. We're creating a survey of what's out there. What are all the properties? What are their zoned? What's developed on there? And then from that baseline, we will then kind of go through area by area and say, well, okay, is this how we want it to stay? Do we want the zoning to remain the same? Do we want the houses to still be in these industrial areas like we were talking about earlier with our ADU exercise? We have a lot of areas like that where we have homes in the commercial and industrial areas, So we need to address those. We have some areas that are zoned commercial. If you when you're driving up and down like Arrowhead and D Street, you'll see like little commercial buildings in the middle, kind of in the middle of the block, as you're driving down. Some of them are empty, kind of a thing, and they're really kind of obsolete in that area. And so we'll be looking at whether or not it's appropriate to still have that commercial zoning, when essentially is what is a residential neighborhood, kind of a thing. I think as of times have changed, where there's in terms of commercial activity or uses kind of thing. The days of the strip centers and commercial stores and those kinds of things. Thanks to the internet and those kinds of things, people are shopping more online, and so we're rethinking a lot of these things. And so part of it is educating. What are our options? What are some opportunities out there? And so sometimes we get in this mode where I'm not sure what's wrong or how we can fix it, but it needs to be fixed, right? And so what do they say? You don't know what you don't know, kind of a thing. And then you hear an idea, or earlier you mentioned about this city did that, or that other city did this item with ADUs. That's kind of what we're doing. We learn from each other. We take what others have learned and improve upon those. And so that's what we'll do. So we will interject on these kind of these workshops, if you will. Virtual more than likely, or maybe just simply, hey, there's an exercise for you on the website. So we can. Let's go on there and go through the questionnaires and those kinds of things. So that's really what it is. It's really there's a lot of items that we need to address, and so let's we need to find a way of getting that input and sharing that information.
Awesome. Great. And one comment. I noticed the survey. It didn't have qualifying or identifying question of whether someone's a resident or a business owner or both. So I would just recommend for future surveys, that would be important information to know.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Armstead.
I have no question.
Oh,
It was
okay.
good. It looked good. I went on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis?
Oh, there I am. Hey, Oliver, that looks great.
Thank you.
I'm actually a little bit inquisitive. The website is sanbernardino2050.com. Is that indicative of anything for 2050? I'll only be 90 then, but.
Generally, general plans have, anywhere from 25 to 30-year life cycles.
Yeah.
And that's really, so it's kind of planning for, this gets us to the next spot, kind of thing. So this is what we want to achieve in our next.
Excellent. No, I think it's a great tool for the community, as well as the commission to use. And will you be able to, and I know that there is an email that will get to you if they have questions, concerns, or whatever, but can this also, or I think I saw something on that, will this also be a portal for them to know when certain things are happening or certain planning? Yeah, so another way to reach out to the community.
Right. I think the middle icon said participate or something like that. So that's that'll tell you what upcoming meetings and stuff are.
I think it's outstanding. The more information we can get out there, I think the better off we'll be in the long run.
And one of your roles as commissioners could be spread the word too. If you have a friend or two, you might want to mention it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we'll all push in that direction, I'm sure. Thank you, Oliver.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Chang.
Yes, I have a question, general question, regarding the project schedule. the project overview. Great website, by the way. I really like the website. I like the
Thank you.
questionnaire. I like everything about it. And wonderful. Just on my curiosity on the general plan, will we be seeing, because general plan comprised of so many topics, I assume that we will be seeing a newly published economic report as well as EIR, obviously, historical context, traffic analysis, yada, yada,
That is correct.
yada. And how do those fit within on this schedule that I'm seeing?
Well,
Is it gonna? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
that's okay. So the timeline covered, I believe, it was a 2.5 year period. That was the top line, and just kind of a bullet bit. But you're right. So we'll be looking at the land use maps. So that'll be a 3-4 month process. We're starting underway to start doing our traffic counts, our survey of our streets in terms of circulation, the adequate widths, and those kind of things. And so there's going to be an overlap of a lot of the a lot of the tasks. We have these we have the mandatory elements, the land use, air quality, we have the conservation for our open space. We have so we have a number of items, and so there's a parallel track, and so that just kind of gives a synopsis of the whole thing. Once we get started, we are started, not once we get started, but when we get into the thrust of what I'll call deliverables, things that we're asking for your guidance, decision, direction, those kinds of things. I envision that there's going to be one way, shape, or form a planning, a general plan item at each of our planning commission meetings. Where we'll be asking you, hey, what do you, here's where we are here. The little snapshots, if you will.
Okay, so what I'm seeing on the project schedule, then it's just currently, for now, you will be updating the schedule moving forward, and you'll be adding more content to this website, obviously, because general plan has so many topics.
We have our working project schedule, and I'm sure you're familiar with these task schedules, and I think it's 8 or 9 pages.
Right.
Where just the land use element, has like 20 tasks.
Right.
Kind of a thing, and has its own timeline, on the bar chart kind of a thing. And so the graphic that you saw earlier just condenses the entire exercise.
Okay.
So you have a feel for. So the basic question, how long is this thing going to take? Right? They can look. They'll look on there. Oh yeah, it's 2.5, 3 years.
Right. Okay. Understand. Yeah, this is not the actual schedule.
Right.
Got it.
Or someone's going to ask, how long is it going to take to do the downtown specific plan? Right? Is that a 1 year item? Is that a 2, 3 year? When you look on there, you can see, well, it's about 18 months.
Right.
It has a lot of tasks involved, but in the scheme of things, it'll be before you, probably about this time next year.
So will you folks be distributing the each topic report, for example, the economic report, when that's done, when that chapter is done, or community design is completed, when that chapter is finished, you distribute it to the planning commission and to us.
Right.
Okay. And let us read it. So we can read it.
You will probably see some semblance of those individual packets, 1 or 2 times before it comes to you for a decision, kind of a thing. So it's not going to be that. It's not going to be okay. Here's the land use map.
Final product.
We want your final product today. We want you to vote on it today. It's not going to be like that. There'll be a process.
Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure that we don't get handed this final product 3 years later and then vote on everything overnight in 2 hours time. We're like, oh yeah.
It's like our regular planning commission meetings. You'll get it on Thursday for our Tuesday meetings, right?
Understood.
No, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that to you.
Is that it, Commissioner Chang? Do you have any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Okay. As far as my part is, thank you for the presentation, Oliver.
You're welcome.
I've been looking forward to this ever since I first became a planning commissioner. There's one thing I always notice at meetings when we would make recommendations and vote, staff would always say, this project is consistent with the general plan. And Oliver's nodding his head because he knows that. And I went to the general plan way back then because I've been serving on the commission now, I think going on 10 years. But I found that the general plan was like general, very broad, very vague, very, people will thrive kind of statements. And so my mantra has been, ever since I learned more about the general plan, is we do need a general plan because it is outdated. We need to update it and revise it and so forth. But we need more specifics for our general plan, because how else can we say this is consistent with the general plan if we don't have a measuring stick? So I'm looking forward. The website looks great. I'm going to go home and sign on so I can get all your notifications and see what else input I can have on that website. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Commissioner Lopez, you have a lot of friends, so I expect you to have a big following. There's going to be a lot of people signing up tomorrow. I could just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that your network your net is cast pretty wide.
It's a good start, in this challenging aspect that you're going to have to engage the community, because that is always a challenge. But I think it's a good start. So I applaud you and your staff.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
if I may,
Uh-huh.
for those of you that are on social media, if you have a Facebook, if you have a Twitter, if you have an Instagram, feel free to use that to share information. There are some Brown Act limitations, though, and that's what I want to remind you of right now. And the city of San Bernardino has a Facebook page. So let's say they put out something related to the general plan, and you have a Facebook page, and you want to share that. It's perfectly fine for you to share a post from the City of San Bernardino's Facebook page to your individual page. Here's what you should not do. Let's say that Commissioner Chang shared a post from the City of San Bernardino's Facebook page on her page. So now the post appears on her Facebook page. Okay, Commissioner Lewis, what you should not do is you should not like that post. You should not comment on that post. You should not share that post. Now remember where I started. You can share the original post. So you can click on the City of San Bernardino's Facebook link to go to the original post from the City of San Bernardino's Facebook page. And just like Commissioner Chang did, you can also share that post, but go back to the original source. And everybody, beware that, generally speaking, you should not like, you should not comment, you should not share things that other commissioners have done. So let's say you're on the City of San Bernardino's Facebook page and you saw that Commissioner Armstead made a comment on the City of San Bernardino's Facebook post, and it said, "Hey, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing." Commissioner Guerrero, you should not like Commissioner Armstead's comment. You should not comment to that comment. Are you following me? So vertical communication, meaning communication between you and the residents and you and the City of San Bernardino's social media accounts, vertical communication. That's fine. It's the horizontal communication. It's the communication between and amongst you commissioners. That's when you can get it in some trouble. So, just know you can use social media to spread the word, to get feedback and all those things. Just stay away from communicating with each other.
Good advice. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So if there are no other further questions on this item, I guess, Oliver, we need a motion to accept it.
It's just a receive and file. Yes.
To receive it and file the presentation of the city's general plan. Do I have a motion to do that in a second?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Great. We have several seconds. Stephanie? Do we need the vote? No?
There's no action
No.
being taken, so we
Okay.
don't need to take a vote on this.
All right then. So then moving on to the reports and announcements, or the director's report.
I have nothing further to report for this evening. Thank you.
Do any of our commissioners have anything to report or announce? No, then
I would
Oh, go ahead.
I would like to ask a question of Oliver, if I could, through the chair.
Yes.
Oliver, I don't know if it's appropriate to bring this up now or not, but the last meeting we had, the last Planning Commission meeting we had, we approved a drive-through restaurant on Waterman and Hospitality.
Yes.
And I've gotten a few phone calls as to, there used to be a specific plan down there that disallowed drive-throughs. I'm sure planning looked at that when planning and the staff recommended approval of that.
So there was, you are correct. There had been a prohibited drive-throughs were prohibited in Hospitality Lane, right down in that stretch. But there was a development code amendment that was done, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, that allowed for those. It lifted that prohibition of drive-throughs on Hospitality.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Okay, then there being no further business, then I call for an adjournment. Do I need a motion for that?
Yes.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? All together, please. Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good, everyone.